Yay. Hello, delegates. This reminds me of when we were doing this virtually. We did, of course, have a virtual pre-RA delegate teletown hall. But oh my goodness, it's a reminder of how much I so enjoyed being in person with you. I don't think this made the reel, Sabrina, and I'm very upset about it. I just want to know. I just want everyone to know I'm upset that this did not make the delegate reel. You know how we always have, recap of the RA. And I don't recall seeing in the recap me going down to the floor. Yeah, and line dancing with my fellow delegates. I don't think that made the recap. I need somebody to answer for that. But I just thought about that when I was watching the reel myself and seeing delegates gather together, talking, working together, having fun together. It just was such an incredible reminder of the space we created to do the work that we needed to do. I want to start off the night by sending our collective support of 3 million members to the members of the Columbus Education Association. As you know, they are on strike, and they, of course, are using their power and their voice to demand what their students and educators need and deserve. You will see on the screen a link that you can go to support them in their efforts. Please send them your love, lift them up in social media, and by all means, go to their GoFundMe page to show our collective NEA solidarity, to make sure that we do everything that we possibly can to support them so they can stand strong and continue to lift up their voices and demand the schools, the resources, the support, the respect that we know our educators need to do the jobs they love. So thank you. Our love goes out to you, to our members of the Columbus Education Association. And I want to thank our Vice President, Ms. Princess Moss. She was on the line with them yesterday morning, and we wanted to thank her for doing that. Thank you all. So guys, we just pulled off an historic RA. We had a representative assembly with thousands of delegates in person with a virtual option. Who ever heard of that? Nobody, but we did it. And as I was talking to Sabrina Tynes Morris, who I recognize at the RA, is sitting next to me, and I talked about the incredible work that the Center for Governance and her phenomenal team did, and all of the teams within NEA, all of our state presidents, all of our local presidents, and our phenomenal executive committee, and my two amazing officers who worked in collaboration to pull off something that has never, ever been done. And as we talked, nothing is ever perfect. But when we took a look at our goals that we set for ourselves at the outset of this representative assembly, I hope you will agree that we were successful. And we'll talk about some of those things as we go throughout this evening. But I just want to thank you for joining us in this space this evening, and we'll talk about what will come ahead. But as always, we will start off our evening with our land acknowledgement, as we do in every NEA meeting. And for that, I'm going to turn to Ms. Christine Sampson Clark from the great state of New Jersey. Christine.
Hi, Becky. Thank you so much. And hi, delegates. How are we this evening? We begin by acknowledging that all of us participating on this call reside, work, and are meeting on the traditional lands served by America's First Peoples. We honor America's First Peoples and all elders, past, present, and emerging. And we are called on to learn and share what we learn about the tribal history, culture, and contributions that have been suppressed in telling the story of America. The land upon which I work and reside is part of the traditional territory of the Lenni Lenape called Lenapehoking. But this evening, I would like to share my personal experiences of learning more about the Native Hawaiians and about the Native people of the lands in Wyoming. As I had the fortune to visit both areas, I had the chance to think about the vision of our land acknowledgement and what that really means. I took the opportunity to learn about the first peoples of each of those areas. I looked upon the land to get an intimate understanding of how the first peoples inhabited those lands before the colonizers took control of their lands, most often in a forcible and violent manner. I recognize the resilience of the first peoples of these and the lands on which we all live and work today. And I ask that you too continue to pay honor to the sacrifices, contributions, resilience, and continued presence of those that were here on these lands before us, and help others, including our students, to never forget. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you. As always, I appreciate when we have our land acknowledgement, Christine, that we not only talk about the history of America's first people, but we talk about them, their continued contributions to this country. Thank you so much for reminding us of that. As always, we are gathered together in a space, even though it is virtual. And because of that, we will remind our delegates and all of our participants of our standards of conduct. And for that, I'm going to turn to Gladys Marquez from the great state of Illinois and Hannah Vandering from the great state of Oregon. Gladys, Hannah?
Thank you so much, Becky. Good evening, delegates. Great to be here. NEA has adopted a standards of conduct policy to ensure that all of our gatherings are welcoming to all and free from discriminatory, harassing, or otherwise unacceptable behavior. Discrimination or harassment based on race, color, ethnicity, religion, sex, age, national origin, sexual orientation, disability, gender identity or expression, or any other characteristic protected by law will not be tolerated. If you experience any discriminatory, harassing, or otherwise unacceptable behavior, please contact me, Gladys Marquez, or Hannah Vandering to report the incident. Thank you for your commitment to ensuring a positive event for all. Hannah.
Thank you, Gladys. And delegates, just as always, as we review, the standards of conduct are put in place to help us live up to those standards. We will, number one, respect others and their views. We'll recognize and value individual differences. We want to promote mutual respect, understanding, and cooperation amongst all participants. And we want to maintain the reputation of NEA by conducting ourselves in accordance with high standard of professionalism. Please remember that harassment may include written or graphic materials that can be shown or sent through email or posted on social media, placed on computer screens or elsewhere, either during an activity, event, or meeting, or in some other way directly related to an NEA event or NEA duties. Again, if you encounter any harassment, please contact Gladys or myself. Madam President, back to you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Gladys, for that reminder of how we will work together in this space. Delegates, I am so excited about our opportunity to gather this evening because it is our opportunity to remind each other of the commitment we made to not having the Representative Assembly only be 4 days, that our delegates, you, me, all of us, are elected for 1 year, for an entire year. And that means that our work is not finished in 4 days. Our delegates who joined us in person and virtually took actions on many, many things. And they did additional work in addition to taking actions. And that additional work carries over into the rest of the year. So not only is it the expectation that our delegates will not just take action and say NEA do, but but that they embrace the fact of the reality that they are the NEA. And so as we adopted a policy statement, as we adopted new business items, as we adopted new resolutions, and as we amended our legislative program, that they, all of you, all of us as representatives to our highest governing body have a responsibility in implementation of the actions that we have taken. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to put before you goals for our representative assembly, and to invite you, ask you to join me in transforming that space into a year-long space of continued learning and community building and taking action together. That is the power of union. And that is exactly what I know you have made a commitment to do. So we were determined for this RA to provide you with the support, the material, to learn together, to share our successes, to lift up new ideas and provide each other with our best thinking and insights, to share that expertise that we brought to that space and beyond. That we would have an opportunity to have conversations, not only at a microphone when we were debating, but that we had opportunities to connect between the gaveling in and gaveling out of the representative assembly. And so we created different kinds of spaces for you to engage with us. And we know that you engage with each other in your state caucuses and in your special interest caucuses, and when you went out just to have dinner. So I want to thank you for helping to meet our purpose of the representative assembly and doing all of those things, because ultimately we wanted you to lead prepared to lead on the strategic objectives that the representative assembly adopted when they adopted the strategic plan and budget. So we trust that you are prepared, and if you are not, you know that you have other leaders that you can call on. You have materials that are posted on our site that are there to guide you. The entire RA, I hope you saw, and this will continue throughout the entire year, reflected the theme of the RA, which was joy, justice, and excellence. And we were focusing specifically on the strength of our educators, the billions of our students, and of course, the power of our community. So with that, kind of framing everything that we did, I set an agenda that not only included those 4 days, but will include you throughout this year. And we'll talk about that at the end of our presentation. One of the things that I wanted to engage with you around was learning. And I'll continue to do that at RAs coming up, that you'll have that chance to learn something, hopefully learn something new, or share something you have learned with your fellow delegates. You heard me talk about this throughout the RA, and for those of you who I've had an opportunity to visit with in our states from California to Kentucky, you lifted up for me the concerns and challenges that you were having around addressing the mental health issues of our students and us, our educators, the well-being of our students and educators, the fact that we and others we were not taking care of ourselves, that others were not taking care of us, the fact that our students needed more from us in this moment. And for that to happen, we have to understand that the heart of that, we have to be centered in social and emotional growth and learning. And so one of the opportunities that I planned for you was to continue that learning. And for those of you who joined us at the summit this year, we talked more about, and we had sessions around the additional leadership competency that we added to our competencies that talk about what we as educators, as leaders should know and be able to do. And that additional competency around social and emotional intelligence was added to the others around advocacy and communication and governance and leadership and organizing, leading our profession, and strategy and fiscal health. So we added to those competencies because we knew that at the core of us being the leaders that we are being called on to be, as well as being the educators we know we must be for our students, we have to ground ourselves in social and emotional intelligence. And in fact, as I visited you around the country, it's one of the things you continue to lift up and ask us to continue to advocate for, to provide the resources and supports so you could address the social and emotional needs of your students, that you understood as educators, as professionals, that social and emotional and academic learning are intertwined, and we have to address all of them. That's true for us too. And so I want to have you experience the brilliance, honestly, of an educator that I had the opportunity to meet and to work with last year. I had been reading a lot about him, but I had not met him. But I had the opportunity to meet him and engage with him in deep discussion along with some other partners around social and emotional health and healing centered learning. And he started his work with youth, particularly youth of color. And as he did that work, he realized that he needed to expand that to adults. And of course, because he's an educator, he realized that he needed to focus in on educators specifically. And so I asked him if he would talk with our delegates about the work that he was doing with youth and with educators, share a little bit about his theory of success around that, and then offer us some strategies and tools that we could practice and we could put into use throughout our school year. So I thought it was the perfect time in our year to come together and listen to Dr. Sean Ginwright talk about his theories on healing-centered learning and building healing-centered communities, and centering our work as educators and as leaders in that social and emotional intelligence domain of our competencies. So we have Dr. Sean Ginwright joining us via video. We're going to listen to his teachings, and then we'll talk a little bit about it after we have had an opportunity to engage with him.
Greetings. It's such an honor for me to be able to join you at the Representative Assembly. I have a deep history of educators in my own family. My mama, was an educator, a preschool teacher in California for years. In fact, she taught me. I was in her class. My aunt was a longtime principal in many schools here in California. She was in Southern California and has supported the educational journeys of hundreds of students throughout her career. One of my favorite educators, his name is Del Roberts, in Riverside outside of Los Angeles. He was my coach. He was my math teacher. He was my mentor. He was my community leader. And Del Roberts, hopefully he might be looking at this. Hopefully you'll see this, Del. But I just want to say how much I appreciate your mentorship, your vision, your love for education that you've given me. I remember when I was in high school, I had a teacher. Her name was Miss Cotter. She was my English teacher, and I didn't like English, but she saw something in me. And one day, Miss Cotter reached on her shelf and handed me a book by an author named James Baldwin. Up until that time, most of the readings and literature we were reading, I couldn't relate to. But when she handed me that book by James Baldwin, it changed me. It was one of the first times that I saw myself in the literature that I was reading. And for you, Ms. Cotter, thank you for indelibly making your mark and giving me the love of literature, the love of reading. And so it is with that deep honor and respect that I come to you today with just a few ideas that I hope will help you think about excellence and educational leadership as you move on from the Representative Assembly. Our society right now is at a crossroads. And the crossroads that we sit at is, on one hand, we could choose to continue to reproduce trauma, the trauma of school shootings, this trauma of neighborhood violence, and trauma of policies that separate children from their families. But we also have a choice that we can also choose transformation, that as educators, as teachers, as those who work to support students and serving meals and bus drivers, all of us who are educators can choose our transformation. And that means that educators in this society are best suited to solve some of the significant problems that we're facing right now. The political divisiveness in our society, the ongoing sort of tensions between red and blue, the ways in which we continue to, in some ways, disregard the humanity of each other. That this is the central role, I believe, that educators can play at this particular time. These are the signs of a fragile and delicate society. And educators are best suited, in my own belief, are best suited to continue to weave the strong fiber and fabric of a democracy that we need. It looks like having conversations like Del Roberts had with me whenever I had a frustrating day. It looks like handing those students a book that they may see themselves in, like Ms. Venencotter gave to me. But whatever it is that we do in our work as educators, our role has the capacity to transform the lives of the students that we care most about. I know that as a society, the challenges that we are facing have a disproportionate impact on the young people. In fact, the Surgeon General just recently came out with a report in December of 2021 that just documented the ways in which Native American students are facing greater levels of isolation, and then African American students are more likely to have lost a parent due to COVID, and Latino students are reporting greater sense of loneliness and mental health issues, and Asian American students are reporting greater stress due to harassment and fear in their communities. These are the issues that are facing our students. And this means that our tools, that our role as educators is not simply to provide the best education, the best academic infrastructure, but we also have a social emotional responsibility to provide healing and to provide an opportunity for our young people to be well again. This means that we have to have new tools as well. And in my most recent book, The 4 Pivots, Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves, I think gives us the tools, gives us the permission to show up differently for each other, and also the permission to support and show up differently for our young people. I want to quickly just talk about these 4 pivots. And the reason I call them a pivot is because if we pivot, it means that we make subtle changes, that over time that subtle change will have a significant impact on whatever it is we want to change. A shift requires work. It requires that we make conscious, deliberate, and sometimes laborious effort to make that change. But a pivot is subtle. If you watch a pivot, you probably have seen the glorious warriors win the championship. I'm sorry for those of you who are Celtics fans. But you watch them pivot. You watch basketball players when they pivot. They keep their eye on the goal. They focus and not have the distractions. And they seamlessly move forward effortlessly to go in another direction. And this is the type of pivot that I'm talking about. A seamless move, an effort for us to move in a different direction. I hope that these 4 pivots will support your own educational leadership and support the ways in which you show up for students, and you show up for families, and you show up for communities, and you show up for each other. The first pivot is a pivot from lens to mirror. And the reason this pivot is important is because oftentimes as professionals, we are given the lens to do the analysis of what our young people and our students face. They face a lot of challenges. But oftentimes we're not given the tool of mirrors, which is reflection, deep reflection about who we are, about our own role, about our own well-being that has an impact on young people. Lens work is an easier work because it focuses on our external reality. Mirror work is difficult because it requires us to do the deeper reflection about the things that matter most to us. Mirror work, for those of you who have a mirror in your house like we all do, mirrors don't lie. A mirror reflects back the truth that you put in front of it. And so our ability to practice mirror work is significant and important in our own sort of quest for justice. It requires that we ask ourselves a question: what am I learning about myself? What have I learned about myself in the last 30 days? What are the areas of my own growth that I need to focus on this year? Who do I need to be to create the society that I want? These are the questions that we reflect on in our mirror work. I hope that in your next staff meeting, in your next meeting with students, in your next meeting with parents, that you come up with some mirror work questions about self-reflection, so that we don't only use a lens to engage in change in our communities and schools, but we also use mirrors. And that is our deep reflection about who we are and who we aim to be. Mirror work is one of the significant pathways to reimagining justice and reimagining ourselves. When we use mirror work and mirrors, it allows us also to use the second pivot, which is a pivot from transactional relationships to transformative relationships. Transactional relationships we know really well. These are relationships that are a function of our titles. I am the principal, you are the student. I am the superintendent, you are the parent. A transactional relationship is a relationship that are defined by roles, it's defined by authority. It's the labels that we've been given to act out our employment. And while transactional relationships are important, they allow our systems to work, they're not simply enough for healing and transformation. And so the pivot from transactional relationships to transformative relationships means that we actually become more human in our work with each other. It allows us to be more vulnerable in our conversations with young people and more vulnerable in our conversations with ourselves. We know from the work of Brene Brown and others that vulnerability, the ability for someone else to pierce into our humanity, to share our human story with one another, that when we do that intentionally, that creates bonds that matter. It allows us to create the deeper relationships that allows us to create something that didn't exist only in our transactional relationships. Now, many industries know this. You can look at anywhere in technology, you could look in the medical industry, you could look in other professions that understand the power of transformative relationships. You might want to think about a practice to use in your next meeting, your staff meeting, or again, your meeting with students or parents, is to use a social emotional check-in. Just take 5 to 10 minutes out of every meeting to ask everyone to go around and just say, how you're feeling today. I know that may seem like just a small, simple act, but when we begin, again, it's a pivot, it's subtle, that when we begin to listen to how people are feeling, their honest feeling about their stress, about what they're worried about, every time we meet, it over time begins to change and transform our relationships with one another, relationships that matter. The third pivot I write about is a pivot from problem to possibility. And we know, y'all, we know that there's a lot of problems to be solved in our schools. There's a lot of problems to be solved in our neighborhoods and in our classrooms. And we need to be able to continue to support young people and students and families with all the problems that are coming their way. But sometimes when we engage only in problem solving, it becomes like playing a game of whack-a-mole. Y'all remember the game whack-a-mole at the arcades? Now, when I was a kid, I had to go to an arcade to play games. So I don't know if y'all know what an arcade, you know what an arcade is. But an arcade, you know, that game whack-a-mole, you're always sort of constantly putting out fires and hitting the next mold. You know, I was at a school just not long ago, and it felt like all the teachers were basically firefighters, constantly putting out fires, stopping fights, dealing with issues that students are bringing to them. And while that's important, if we're not focusing and making the pivot to possibility creating, right, then we only find ourselves in problem solving, crisis prevention mode. Possibility creating allows us to imagine the communities, imagine the schools that we want. Possibility creating means that we oftentimes use this time that we have together to come up with new solutions to old challenges and problems. In a school that I was working with not long ago that was doing that sort of constant firefighting, they decided to create a little sanctuary in their or a sanctuary sort of meditation room in their school. It wasn't going to change the entire school, but what it did is when the students went into this room, when the teachers went into this room, when the entire staff used that room, the only rule was for them to be quiet, to slow down. Now, over time, that little room that they created began to create a reverberating impact on the climate of that entire school. It didn't change overnight, but their pivot to create a meditation room was a function of a possibility that existed in order to deal with the firefighting climate that had existed in that school for some time. So the pivot from problem to possibility is an important part of our quest and our journey for justice. Lastly, and certainly not least, is the pivot from hustle to flow. And we know what it feels like to be engaged in ongoing hustle and frenzy. I call it an addiction to frenzy. You know, hustle is it's an addiction because sometimes we feel important. We feel that we matter when our calendars are so full, when we have so many requests, when the demands on our time, exceed the capacity for us to show up in powerful ways. This addiction to frenzy is real, y'all. For example, how many of you have a to-do list? I know, everybody has a to-do list. The first thing you probably do when you do something when you complete something on your to-do list is you add 3 more things back on it. As a result, there's this sort of ongoingness, right, of being busy and hustle and trying to complete all the tasks that we need to complete in a week. It means that we say yes to tasks that we know we're not going to be able to get to. It means that we take on too many committee meetings and too many responsibilities. It means we say yes or we say no, but we feel guilty that what is it called? Fear of missing out, FOMO, right? So there's a lot of that's involved in this frenzy sometimes that our lives and our work feels like. And so the last pivot is a pivot from hustle to flow. And flow just means that we set more realistic timelines for ourselves. It means that we say no without guilt. It means that we take intentional time for ourselves, that we rupture the school day, create spaces for us to slow down. Now I know that this pivot from hustle to flow may be really difficult because there's so much coming at us all the time. But it's important for us to take just 5 minutes a day. It could be during quiet evening, it could be in the meeting, it could be in the morning, it could be during your commute to work. It could be just 5 minutes of closing your eyes and silent time in your homeroom spaces with your students. It just means that we try to be intentional about avoiding and assuming that frenzy is the only way to work, live, and play. These 4 pivots give us the permission to reimagine justice and reimagine our own lives and reimagine ourselves so that we can actually create the conditions for a different way of being in our schools and the different way of being in our communities. I hope that these 4 ideas encourage you. I hope that these 4 ideas support your own educational leadership. I'm going to leave you with a challenge, and that's the 30-day challenge. I want to encourage you to use one or more of these pivots for the next 30 days. Use it in your staff meetings. Use it in your meetings with your students, your classes with students, or your next parent meeting. Just use one or more of those practices for the next 30 days, and then come together and see what happened and how that felt. And over time, I hope that these pivots create the opportunity and the permission for us to transform our schools and transform our neighborhoods and classrooms in ways that matter, that actually create healing and create an intentional choice for us to move out of trauma and into transformation. I thank you for your work. I thank you for your dedication, and I'm humbled and honored to be able to share this with you. Go out and heal the world. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh my goodness. So I hope you had just a little glimpse of the opportunity that I had in meeting Dr. Jim Wright. I did have the opportunity to ask him questions along with some other really brilliant colleagues in this doing this kind of work. And to think together about what our role could possibly be as educators. And one of the things that he, as well as others, challenged me on, and I'm going to challenge you on, I'm going to pass that on because we are the NEA, is, they marveled at the sheer size of the NEA and the potential power, the breadth and diversity of our membership, and our ability to have impact and to influence and to lead transformation. And so their challenge to us was for us to do the work we needed to do so that we could lead in the way that we needed to lead. So as you listen, as I listened, we had some delegates sharing with us that they did their homework already. Yay! So thank you. Do we have a name? Oh, okay. We didn't get a name. One of the delegates typed into the chat that they had already done their homework. That absolutely warms my heart. Whoever typed that in, and in fact, if you type that in, if you would go ahead and type your name in too, do that, because I'm going to be reaching out to delegates over the course of the next couple of months. To ask them if they did take on this 30-day challenge, if they had watched the video ahead of time and taken notes like I did, and if they took on this challenge. And I am going to ask for some of you to share your stories. So if you'd be willing to do that, I'm going to be reaching out to you so you can share with your fellow delegates both the challenges you found along the way to stay true to the 30-day challenge, but also, of course, of your successes. So we're gonna find out from you whether you were successful at beginning to shift from doing lens work to doing mirror work, which you heard Dr. Jim Wright talk about as that deeper, doing that deeper kind of reflection, whether you were able to begin to make that shift, that pivot, and I like the way he described that, that pivot from that transactional relationship to that transformative relationship. Whether you were able to make that pivot from focusing on the problem versus focusing on the possibilities that would allow us to reimagine our schools and our communities, so that we can have a vision of what we wanted them to be. So we're always looking toward that vision, and allowing us the space and the time to come up with new ideas and new solutions. And then that fourth pivot that he talked about from that hustle. Okay, can I get a witness in the room? Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Hustling every single day, saying no to nothing. Is that correct? No to nothing. So Dr. Jim Wright not only giving us permission to do that, but asking us, imploring us to do that, to make that pivot from hustle, where our calendars are so full, we know we can't get it done, but we do, and we do know the stress of not getting it done, and we do know the stress of not building in time to eat properly, to rest enough, to find joy in our families and friends, to exercise enough, to build community with others. We find no time for that because we are hustling. And there's all of us, those of us in this space tonight, those of us who have made the decision to become leaders in our union, we know the weightiness of the work that we've taken on. We knew it when we decided to become educators, as we dedicated our lives to teaching and nurturing and assisting our students in the many ways our educators, from teachers to bus drivers to nurses and counselors, our higher education faculty, and our retired members continue to do. All of those things weigh on us. And so we feel this great deal of responsibility. We always believe we need to be the ones all the time standing in the gaps, which are just getting bigger for our students. I saw that throughout the pandemic. I saw that as I traveled to Alabama and to Florida, Illinois, and every point in between. And we need to stop. We need to make that pivot from hustle to flow, knowing that setting up realistic timelines for ourselves, saying no without guilt, taking that time for ourselves and to be with others, to slow down. And Dr. Jim Wright said 5 minutes a day. Now, we can do that, folks. We can find 5 minutes a day to slow down and take that breath. So what he talked about is that 30-day challenge. And, if you've done a lot of reading and these kinds of things, when you're practicing new tools, using new tools and practicing new strategies, that it takes a while to build up that habit, right? And so he was deliberate in saying 30 days, practice it for 30 days, because he knows that if we do it for 30 days, it's more likely to become a habit. And once it becomes a habit, then it's more likely for us to continue to incorporate it into how we live and how we show up. One of the powerful questions, he asked a lot of questions of us, and I hope you will do as I did, and not watch and watch his video more than once. Every time I watch it, I write something else down, and I hope you'll do that too. Dr. Jim Wright asked us a lot of powerful questions. The one that really resonated with me, and I'm curious for you to know what you might have written down, or as you watch it again, what might resonate with you. But the question that he asked that really resonated with me was, who do I need to be? Who do I need to be to create the society I want? We know as educators, if we don't focus on our own well-being, we cannot focus on others, and certainly not our students. Who do I need to be to create the society I want? I want you to think about that question and think about others that he posed to us as you process and continue to learn and grow and practice. One of the things that I asked Dr. Jim Wright to do was to share with us a toolkit, the toolkit that we could use, and he agreed to do that. So I want to make sure that you spend time to access that toolkit. You see that on the screen. You can go, as we as I instructed you to do throughout the RA, to delegate resources. Go to NEA.org/RA to delegate resources, documents for delegates. You're very familiar with that. We did that throughout the RA. And you can access his toolkit and you can share it with others. This is what I do want you to do, though. Make sure that you include this information. Please type in NEA 2022, because this was a special ask of Dr. Jim Wright to share this with us. So we want to be able to track how many people have accessed it. And we want to be able to share with your state or your local that you have access to, because we hope that in practicing, reviewing, using the toolkit, that you will say that you want to lead in this work yourselves. So we want to make sure that we have your name, the name of your state and of your local as well. One of the things that Dr. Jim Wright, one of those pivots that he talked about, moving from problems to possibility, is something that I've been talking about. I talked about it at the RA. I've been talking about it for 2 years. And that is that if we always stay in that problem space, whatever it is, you know, the crazy and stupid of standardized testing, if we start from that, then we're going to always tinker around trying to fix it. We know that we can't fix the stupid and crazy assessment and accountability system in this country. We have to transform it into something it is not currently. To do that, as I said to you at the RA, we have to lift up our heads. We can't stay there. We've got to reimagine what's possible. And to do that, we have to go through really what's a very difficult exercise, and that is the exercise of visioning. We here at the NEA have been engaging in that throughout the last year. Our NEA Board of Directors have been doing it, engaging in it with us. Our state presidents, our local leaders have engaging with us in visioning, because we need to spend the time and do the work to create that vision of the future that we want for our students and for our educators, for our public schools, for our communities. And so we asked you to engage with us at the RA, and some of you did, but we want to broaden that engagement, we want to continue and broaden that engagement. And so I want to put up on the screen a way for you to continue to engage with us around the questions that you may have engaged on at the RA while we were in the space there, but some of you did not do that yet with us. And so I want to ask you to do that. Now we have a QR code, I believe, that's coming up to let us know where we can go to engage in the questions that we pose for the delegates, so that we are focused on that visioning, that work that I asked you to do. We're gonna, there it is, there's the QR code. So I'm gonna ask you to take a picture of that. And if you take a picture of that, that's going to take you to the site where you can engage with us on those questions that the delegates engaged with us while they were at the representative assembly. So take a picture of that QR code there so that you can share your thoughts and insights. And you know what, don't stop there. Please share it with others so that your colleagues at your schools and work sites, your campuses, can engage with us as well. I'm just going to review the questions with you so you know what it is you're going to be sharing your thoughts on with us so that we can do that visioning work. The first question was, how will the role of schools change in relation to the ever-changing availability of information? We've seen that impact us quick, fast, and in a hurry during the pandemic. And so it's something that we want to be thinking about as we think about the future of public education. The second question that we posed at the Representative Assembly, and we want you to take some time going into with us, is what is working best for students in public education? How do we maintain what is working in a system that is changing? So we always want to think about, the question is always, what do we want to bring forward that is working? And that helps us to determine where the gaps are and what we yet need to create. And then the final question is, how will a reimagined system of public education look? What will it look like? We want you to describe that for us. And how will you feel different for your students and for their families? You'll see again on the right side of the screen the QR code. So if you did not see that as we went through, there is a QR code for you to access those questions. So I'm going to give you a minute to take that picture as well. We'll give you just a few more minutes. We want you to be able to access that. Okay, we're gonna talk about the commitments that I laid out for you at the Representative Assembly. As I shared with you in the beginning, the very first day of the Representative Assembly, and then throughout the Representative Assembly, I referenced back to them. I want to share that with you again today. And remind me of the commitments that I asked you to take on. We took action at the Representative Assembly. This was after I asked you to take this on, and you took action, and you indeed did pass new business item A, our policy statement on safe, just, and equitable schools. And the first commitment I asked you to make was that we demand and work to create safe, just, and equitable schools. Those schools that we know must be grounded in our students' humanity and in the respect for educators. So that was the first commitment I asked you to make. The second commitment I asked you to make was to defend our democracy. And in defending our democracy, I asked you specifically to take on the issue of voting rights. We know the efforts of some to curtail the rights of Americans to vote. We know that in voting, we have our voice. And so we as educators must do everything we can to defend our democracy by strengthening voting rights so that all people can vote. And we know that when they do, they will support public education because they understand, as we do, that it is the foundation of our democracy. And then I asked you to join us in organizing, because we know through organizing, we will build our power. We also know that that power must be built from within, but we cannot do it by ourselves. That we have to reach out to our allies, welcoming everyone and anyone who will join us in our righteous fight for our students and for this country. So those are the commitments that I asked you to make. And then this evening, I talked about this at the RA, but I want to share with you this evening that I have shared with our executive committee, with our board of directors, with our state leaders, that our priority here at the NEA is making sure that come this November, we elect pro-public education candidates up and down the ballots. That necessarily means that you have to exercise your power and influence in your families, in your communities, in your schools, with your colleagues, with our members across this nation. Because here's the thing, educators are still the most trusted voice in this country. And when we say that we need equitable funding for our schools, people listen to us. When we say we need additional mental supports for our students, people listen to us. When we say we need to create those racially and socially just and equitable schools throughout our nation, people listen to us. The elections that are coming up in November are absolutely critical to the success of our students, to public education, to you as educators, to our communities. I know that you will do your part in making sure that we exercise our power and our influence. I want you to take action tonight, and I'm going to ask you to take out your phones, and you'll see on the screen how you can sign up to be an ed activist by texting APP to 48744. Text APP to 48744. Once you take that step, it will continue to keep you connected to ways you can take action in your locals and in your states as we head into the November elections, so that we can ensure that we have elected leaders from our school boards all the way up to members of Congress and to our governors, that we have people who care about our kids, who believe and will support and respect our educators, and will provide the kind of funding we need so we have the resources to do the jobs we love and our students can live into their brilliance. So please join us in being ed activists so that we can elect people who will support public education. You heard me talk earlier about safe, just, and equitable schools and the fact that we passed a policy statement, and it is a wonderful policy statement for sure. We had leaders from all over this country work on that, and we had our delegates debate and take action on that policy statement. But you and I both know that while a policy statement is as incredibly inspiring as the vision that was a part of that policy statement is, really, until we take action in implementing it, things won't change for our students. And so we need you to commit to taking action on building, creating, imagining what those safe, just, and equitable schools will look like. We have lots of resources here at the NEA. If you have not already gone to our website, NEA Ed Justice, please do that. When you do that, you can become part of the NEA Ed Justice League, which will not only provide you with the opportunity to know when we need your collective strength and power to take action, but it provides you with all kinds of resources so that you can be the leaders in building those safe, just, and equitable schools. On the slide, you see an action that we want you to take immediately. All of you are very well aware that during the previous administration, the previous president, and the previous Secretary of Education, if we can use that title to describe her, those people whose names I will not share, I will not mention, did everything they could do to decimate Title IX, to take away rights from all of our students, whether they were students of color, whether they were students with disabilities, whether they were LGBTQ plus students, whether they were women, did everything to decimate the protections we have and work so hard to build into Title IX. Our current Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, and the Department of Education has reached out to the NEA to specifically ask educators to provide their feedback. And this is really, really important that they hear from educators during the time that they provide for what they call public comment. You will see the place to go to, NEA.org/Title IX. That's not hard to remember, but take a screenshot of it. Please do that immediately as they are collecting that information right now. And you see on the screen that our opportunity to participate in that ends on September 12th. NEA, please take action and go to that site, NEA.org/Title IX, so that we, the NEA, can show up in a big way. So the Department of Education knows that our educators understand our commitment to restoring the freedoms that the previous administration took away and the rights that we had in our schools and for our students, and making sure that we're fighting for those schools and for our college campuses so that they can be safe and welcoming environments. So please take that action immediately. So delegates, those are the things that we did, some of that at the Representative Assembly, but some of it we did not have the opportunity to do together during those 4 days. But as I said at the start of our time together tonight, the 4 days was just the beginning. In fact, we started before those 4 days. Then we had our pre-RA activities that many of you participated in, from our student conference to our conference on racial and social justice, to all of the work that that NCUEA did at the pre-RA. You were already taking actions, engaging with each other those 4 days and tonight, and we will continue that throughout the year, because we must continue to organize for power in this union. That we must do. To do that, I'm going to ask you to continue to engage with me throughout the year so that we can organize for power. You will see on the next slide those dates that we have already identified, and we know we didn't give you but maybe about a month notification on this particular meeting. But I'm putting that slide up now so that you can see those dates. Take a screenshot. Put them on your calendar now. We will be sending out an email with all of the dates in them, and then a reminder with a reminder ahead of that time with these individual dates. I said earlier that I'm going to be reaching out to you, so I want you to be thinking about that now, that you will be that delegate that will say, yes, I will share my story with our other delegates on November 17th. So on November 17th, I want you to be ready to share what you did around the elections. What did you do? How did you do it? Were you successful? What did you learn? I want you to be ready to share that with our delegates. So I'm going to be calling on you to do that for our November 17th meeting. And then in February, I will reach back out to you to talk about what you've learned. Talk about what you've done to continue your development as leaders. We'll talk about, again, Dr. Jim Wright's challenge for us, and we'll talk about what you've done. So again, I'll be reaching out for you to tell me your stories. Tell me what you've done. By May, we will be heading into our next Representative Assembly. There's no way of predicting what will be happening by May of 2023. My goodness, how our world changes so quickly. But I want you to be thinking about that now. What is it we need to be focused on at our next Representative Assembly? What issues are emerging? I'll be traveling around the country this year as well, and listening to educators and listening to students and listening to parents, talking about the issues that they're facing and the ideas and solutions that they're not only imagining, but so many of you are already implementing. So we'll talk about that in preparation for our Representative Assembly. That will be just over a month from that last time, May 10th. Some of you by then will be elected as delegates to our 2023 representative assembly. Some of you may not have been elected yet or may not have been notified that you've been elected. Many of you joining us tonight will be delegates again next year. So that work will continue. We will bridge the work from this year till next year. So I want you to be thinking about that tonight, about how you will contribute to this community of our RA delegates to that goal that I set out for the Representative Assembly, that we will continue to learn together, we will continue to connect with each other, we will continue to grow and challenge each other. We will take responsibility, each of us and all of us, for the actions we took at the Representative Assembly. And then we will tell our stories. You know, I talk about that all the time, how powerful our stories are. Tell our stories so that we are inspired by each other and we inspire others to join our movement. At the Representative Assembly, I talked to you about our strategic vision, that we would not only unite our members, but the entire nation to reclaim public education as a common good, as the foundation of this democracy, and then transform it into something it was not designed to be: a racially and socially just and equitable system that prepares everyone, to succeed in a diverse and interdependent world. That is our strategic vision. That is what I saw you engaging in already throughout this year. That is what I'm asking you to make a commitment to, as we unpack what that means when we say every student, every educator, every school is excelling and everyone knows it. That is the work we get to do together. I want to conclude our time tonight as we started by thanking you for all you did for us to have a successful and purposeful and powerful Representative Assembly, for your commitment to making it more than 4 days, for your dedication to the work that we have ahead of us, for always, in all ways, making me so proud of the work you do for our students and for each other, for this union, and for our communities. Thank you, NEA. Thank you for stepping up to be delegates to the 2022 Representative Assembly. And I look forward to continuing to engage with you throughout this year and into next year. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening, and good night.